obscene anti-Jewish propaganda. The consequences of the Holocaust are of decisive significance for the world's present and future. The loss of whole generations of scholars, philosophers, poets, writers, artisans, the whole spectrum of world of human activity is lost to us and can never be regained or recaptured. It is still evident now and will be experienced for generations to come. The observers can be in an emotional setting, the seeing of partisan or leader reciting of prose and poetry, of the camps in the ghetto, the showing of sketches and drawings of concentration camps, the telling of our experience of the Holocaust. This may act as a catharsis which at times is necessary to our retaining our sanity. The religious observance provides solace and attempts to find answers and meaning to the Holocaust. As of today, neither the history, the emotions, the religions, or the many other factors in the society have provided the world with answers. We have the questions, but not the answers. How can we rid this world of the forces and conditions that show us who plague this planet of ours? Only through commemoratives such as this and others being held throughout the world can the past be remembered in order that our future be secure. At this time, I'd like to call on Rabbi Slager, Congregation President, for the invitation.
An invocation is traditionally offered at gatherings by a person of the cloth, and I understand it to be an invocation of God's name and thereby of God's blessings. No minaret and no muezzin. We have no steeples and no bells to call people together. And so, in this context and at this time, I wonder what it means that we gather here at Sonoma State University in a secular context, the observance, and yet also invoke God's name. It is perhaps because the Holocaust created for us that greatest challenge to traditional religious belief, and stands still as the knot that binds us in free expression of religious sentiment and devotion. And yet, without muezzin, without church bells to call us to prayer, I want to remind you how it is that people would come together to pray. It is the tradition of the shaman passing through town, knocking on doors, rattling the shutters, and calling out, "It's time to get up. Everyone get up. It's time to praise our Creator." Please rise. As we gather here in holy and sacred and solemn convocation, we will sing and we will speak. We will remember. We will struggle to understand the meaning of an event which may in the end have a meaning. This we will do all those things that we moderns know how
Baptist clergyman and a 41-year academic. I started teaching at the college level in 1949, and I'm officially retired from Minnesota at age 65, and I'm now teaching in 2 schools and serving as an interim pastor for my denomination in Fort Bragg. And if any of you have anything that isn't being done, let me know, and I'll probably find time to do it. I don't know how to retire, I guess, but that isn't really why I'm here. I'm here because 17 years ago, due to a situation that developed on my campus at the University of Minnesota, I had to confront the Holocaust as a person, as an individual. Not as a Christian yet, because that came later. That came as a part of the general revelation of the confrontation of the Holocaust as an individual. The department chairman of religious studies called it creative conflict. It was, in fact, an argument between faculty members, and not a pleasant one. The circumstance was in relation to the Yom Kippur War and the Six-Day War. You will remember those years. You will remember that a great deal of turmoil accompanied those events on our college and university campuses among Arab and Palestinians and people in support of the Arab League and so on, and the Jewish community that happened on our campus. We had just launched a studies program in 1972 at the University of Minnesota, and we had done so with a rather bold and straightforward declaration of pure insanity. We offered a 1-quarter course. I don't know whether you're familiar with the quarter system or not, but that's 10 weeks of torture instead of 16 weeks of torture, which is the semester system. Well, there are 3 quarters in the academic year, and we offered a 1-quarter course in Minnesota entitled Religions of the 20th Century Mediterranean World. Now, that's a formidable title all by itself. And it was an experiment. We were attempting to find out whether, in fact, students at the University of Minnesota in the upper Midwest, yes, it gets very cold. Yes, there is a stable Jewish community there, which I will talk about later. But we simply wanted to find out whether students would take a course like that as an introduction to academic study of religion, which was brand new at our university. To our delight, we filled it to room size, 150 students. Well, the chairman took a quarter leave and came to me and said, would you do the Christianity section of this course? And I looked at him and said, yes, I will. And I didn't know what I was asking myself to get into. Did you ever try to teach the whole history in 3.5 weeks? Well, that's all right. My colleague just ahead of me, a distinguished Islamist, not, by the way, a Muslim personally, but a Lebanese Orthodox Christian, a member of the Farah family, the Farah Slacks people, was teaching the Islam. I came in the middle with the Christianity section, and David Blumenthal, then a young, as yet unrecognized scholar of Judaism, come to us, and he was teaching the Judaism section the last 3.5 weeks. In the course of his presentations, he announced that he was going to be showing a film on the Holocaust. The name of the film is the very well-known film called Nacht und Nebel, Night and Fall. It's a French film based on Auschwitz, which, and this is a footnote, you get used to this. I lecture in parentheses followed by footnotes. I interrupt myself all the time because things have to be said that can't be said otherwise. And one of them about that film is, if you have seen it and have not been so informed, you now know that the word Jew never appears in that film. Not once, even though it's a film about Auschwitz. At any rate, the film was going to be shown, and the Islamists accused the Judaism scholar, David Blumenthal, of showing a, quote, Zionist propaganda film. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, those of you who've seen that film, if there's ever a film that is not a Zionist propaganda film, that one is responsibility for his classroom. For our university, in its faculty constitution, states irrevocably that what is done in the classroom at the discretion of the professor with the knowledge of the dean of the college in which he teaches, and that he can, with only that constricture, bring anything he or she wants into the room. So it was fully within his rights, but more than that, three of us also went and viewed the film with David Blumenthal and with his students. I particularly, since I was the other teaching faculty member, sort of caught in the middle. So during this event, my building was one further off from the little community in the northwest corner of the University of Minnesota called Dinkytown. Don't ask me about Dinkytown. Just accept it. It is a place. It is a real place. How it got its name, no one knows. But there it is, Dinkytown. It's where the bookstores are and the restaurants and so on. I was going to lunch out of my office building when Caesar Farah came out of the building next to mine where he was housed and fell in beside me. And we just walked together the 2.5 blocks over to the restaurant area. And suddenly, without any provocation on my part, with no introduction or anything, he simply said, 500,000, maybe 6 million, no. Now, I knew that he was wrong. I knew it in my gut. I knew it in my head, but I didn't know it in fact. I did not have enough information. Turn to Caesar Farah and say, Caesar, you're wrong, and I'll show you that you're wrong. I could not do that. I am an Americanist. My field is American religions. Notice the S. Emphasis on religious pluralism, religious diversity. The protections, a course designed to protect the First Amendment of the Establishment Clause, emphasizing the realities of religious pluralism. I, as a Baptist minister, am very little that I've done is popular. It's just important and right. That makes the difference, doesn't it? I had what's called an internal monologue. That's an argument with yourself when you lose the argument. Okay, hotshot Americanist, big-time American religions professor, distinguished something or other at the University of Minnesota. Why couldn't you challenge Caesar Farah? Now, when they found Buchenwald and Bergen-Belsen and the remnants of the slave labor system all over occupied Europe, and they published the pictures of the emaciated survivors of those camps that were still alive against the fences, staring, blank-faced and blank-eyed, skeletons. We saw that. I saw that. But I couldn't answer Caesar Farah and tell him he was wrong and defend him. Well, I tell you, I lost the argument. I asked the question, what can an Americanist, a student of American religions, pose as an academic question in order to examine the information, get enough invited me to join him for one of his sessions, the 19th one. And he questioned me quite closely. This tape that was broadcast all over the upper Midwest. It became a part of an archive series on the Holocaust, which David Cooperman put together. He also invited me to lecture on my area of interest to his class on the Holocaust, which he was then teaching. I went to the class, presented my lecture, and discovered afterwards something that bothered me a great deal. I found out that after I was finished, the Jewish students, not all of them, but many of the Jewish students in that classroom that day resented my being there, based on the fact that their statement was, what is a Christian doing in a Jewish event? The Holocaust belongs to us. Now, that led me to some deep personal soul searching and to answer that question, which I'm going to do. But I'm going to tell you first that the next year, David Cooperman invited me to consider teaching the Holocaust course at the University of Minnesota. And I taught it for a number of years as a member of the Jewish Studies faculty, only non-Jewish member of that faculty for the last several years till I retired. And I taught the Holocaust. And 65% of my students were Jewish, and about 40 or 35% were not. And I taught it during the day and also in the evening. And in the evening classes, that reversed. About 60 to 65% non-Jews, and the remainder would be Jewish students. When I came into the classroom, then, education, they had received information about the Holocaust. And being college students, they knew everything. There's an old joke in the college world. The reason that college is such a rich place of knowledge is the freshmen bring so much in and the seniors take so little out. So I introduced every lecture, first day, in the first 5 minutes, with 3 statements. 1, I am not a Jew. 2, the reason I am here is because if Jews are the victims of the Holocaust, Christians are the perpetrators of the crime. And it is that that allows me to address the issues of the Holocaust. I want to know why 6% of those who were guilty of the atrocities in the Holocaust were baptized Christians with their names on the parish rolls of the Protestant and Roman Catholic churches in Germany. I want to know that as a Christian. And therefore, I am in the Holocaust right up to here. And then I would smile and say, the third reason is, I know more than you do. And it took them 3 weeks to find that out. You see, when that question first emerged, what did the Christians know, the Protestant Christians in America know? I went to the religious periodicals, but before I did that, I realized that I could make a foundation upon which to act. No foundation upon which to do systematic, careful academic research. In the course of about 4 months, I read 16 books on the Holocaust. Only afterwards did I find out that of the 16, because I picked them as an academic, picks books. These are you look at the indexes, you look at the content, and you say, aha, this is what I need. And you put it aside and add it to the stack. Some you reject, based on the fact that you are looking for well-done, well-researched, academic, and informative books that will be truly helpful. Only afterwards did I find that the 16 books that I had picked appear on every major list of the most important 20 or even read them. And to go there in 1973, 1974, 1975, and find out that these periodicals that had been bound in 1935 had never been read or opened was pretty discouraging. But in looking at 1935, 1937, and 1938, randomly selecting bound periodicals from a number of different denominational sources, I looked and discovered, to my dismay and to my delight, that they were full of everything that was going on in Germany about the Jews. Now let me tell you a little bit about these periodicals. In the 1930s, there were about 1,200 religious periodicals published to the American Protestant community of all persuasions, from tiny little monthlies that had a circulation of 3,000 up to papers like the Christian Herald that had a monthly circulation of 248,000. They were published by denominational houses and also by independent publication people. The best known of all those periodicals is the Christian Century. Now, the Christian Century, then and now, was and is the most single-read periodical in the religious press. Why? Because its influence far exceeds its hard figures. In the 30s, its publication numbers averaged 40,000. That was its total. But it was known, as it is known today, that the Christian Century is read by at least 5 people for every issue. It is the most quoted, it is the most used from the pulpit, and it is the most used by other religious periodicals. But if there are 1,200 of them, and only a few of them are important, what about the rest? Also, 30 million people is the estimated readership for the 30s. Now today, there are over 1,500 such periodicals, and the estimated readership is 60 million. Only 8 to 10 of those periodicals are ever quoted in the non-religious press. So what we're talking about is the biggest under press in the United States. Read by Christians, received in their homes. The lists, Lutheran Witness, Lutheran Standard, Baptist Standard, Christian, the Mennonite Quarterly. Well, you can go on and on. The Watchman Examiner, which is the big Baptist paper at that time, was on. This is the universe from which this can be taken. Well, you obviously can't read 1,200 periodicals for 12 years or 13 years, or as it turned out, from the time that Adolf Hitler first emerged in his role in 1921 in the very, very small National Socialist Party to the end of the war. So what do you have to do? You take what is called a typology, a representative sample of all of these periodicals, represent various theological positions within Protestantism, from left liberal to fundamentalist. And you create a list that are typical, representative of all of these various positions: left liberal, moderately liberal, central, conservative, fundamentalist, and so on. And you use all of the periodicals for the entire time so that you have a consistent record. For instance, The King's Business, published by the Bible Institute of Los Angeles here in California, was publishing at that time. So what did I do? I read every one of the King's Business publications for 13 years. That's what I did, along with 51 others, to form the basis for the research that would ultimately appear in the book that is to your left. Now, what I must tell you, probably, if you do not know it already, or if you suspect it, will confirm that suspicion, but some of you may not be aware of this. Virtually nothing that happened to the Jews during the Nazi era was not recorded, not in the slave labor system was discovered. No death camps were left, by the way. But the slave labor system was still intact. And people were found in Mauthausen and Buchenwald and Bergen-Belsen and in the notorious Nordhausen camp. And all of these places, Flossenburg, Sachsenhausen, Dachau, they were filled with these remains of this terrible, inhumane treatment of Jews and others, dehumanizing them, using them as slave labor, exterminating them when they had been literally worked to death by the control of their diet. You give workers 600 calories a day, and you'll get 4 months of work from them before they die. This was calculated in Berlin by the planners. And for those who can't work, you give them 280 calories a day, you put them in ghettos, and they will either starve to death or they will die of any disease that comes because their immune system will be completely destroyed and they will not be able to fight anything that swept through these ghettos. The influenza, the measles, cholera, typhus, whatever. 1.5 million Jews died in the ghettos. Remember that. They didn't die in the gas chamber. There's a book that all of you should read. Written by a woman by the name, her then name was Slager. Sarah Slager. The name of the book is Stolen Years. When she, with her parents, into the Rich Ghetto at age 10, both of her parents died in the ghetto. She then went to Auschwitz and ended up in a camp way out in Slovenia, in the eastern Prussia area, so far from the fighting that they traveled 4 days at the end of the war when their camp was liberated, before they saw any more devastation. They were making aircraft parts. They were between 10 and 16 years old, these young women. 5 of these young women formed a family in the camp. And they lived and are alive today. Sarah Slager lives in Israel. I've been in her home in Tel Aviv. And she's about 5 feet tall with her high heels on. She's a bundle of energy. And she was absolutely convinced that I was going to starve to death before I left her house. She was a pusher, only it was food. But Sarah Slager tells one of the most poignant stories that you could possibly read about the degradation, the human degradation of these slave labor camps. This was an all-women's camp of 500 women with women guards. The SS were outside. They were not in the camp. The commandant was a woman who brutalized these young women in unimaginable. You cannot imagine what this woman put these young women through. One day, they, by the way, were on one side of the village, and every day they marched through the village to the workplace and back, morning and evening. All the blinds facing the street were by the people in the village. One day in the dead of winter, they got a truckload of stockings. They were very excited. They thought that maybe the Germans were softening. But they found out that that wasn't why they got the stockings. The reason they got these wool stockings was because in the cold of winter, their legs had become so frostbitten that they had open ulcers on their legs. The workers in the factory who were not slave labor complained about the appearance of these young women and their legs, so they brought them stockings. least London, if not of all of Great Britain. John Rushbrook kept hearing about things that were going on under the Nazi rule. So he wrote a letter to J.H. Hertz asking for information. In effect, Rushbrook was asking for information while at the same time expressing the sympathy and concern of Baptists for the persecuted Jews. Part of the reply of his letter, I am quoting, but the letter itself was published by the Watchman Examiner, which was the national Baptist paper for the United States, in 1942, in December, with a black border on the editorial page, so it would not be missed. Here's the part of the letter that I want you to hear. Destruction, total and irretrievable, is overhanging Israel in Europe. A sentence of death has been pronounced upon the entire Jewish population on the continent. And, now listen carefully, please, by machine gun and chamber. In 42, they didn't know what to call these death camps. They called them poison chambers or steam chambers. All they knew is there was some way by which the Germans were mass killing Jews. Already, by machine gun, by poison chamber, by torture and famine, millions of my brethren have already fallen victims to the Nazi fury. In such a time when multitudes of my brethren are daily slaughtered, the sympathy and prayers of our countrymen strengthen our faith in humanity and cause us hopefully to look forward to the victorious peace. Now, I don't know whether you picked it up or not, but all four of the killing methods that were used by the Nazis are mentioned in that sentence. The machine guns are the Einsatzgruppen. The poison chambers are the death camps, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Majdanek, Auschwitz, and Treblinka. The killing factories and the starvation and the torture were taking place in the ghettos and in the slave labor camps. Date published in America, December 1942. By 1943, 5 of the 6 death camps had been named in the American Protestant press in the ones I read. If I had looked for the 6 other periodicals, I probably could have found them. But in the sequence of those I was using, 5 of the 6 death camps were named to American Protestant Christians by 1943. Now, obviously, the questions had to be addressed. Did American Protestant Christians know what was happening to the Jews in Germany and Europe under the Nazis based on information published in the American Protestant press? This is the first question. A review of the materials published during the period of Nazi domination in Germany and Europe, 1933 to 1945, centering on specific events and information, states clearly that American Protestant Christians did know what was happening to the Jews under Hitler and the Nazis from early 1933 through the liberation of the death camps, concentration camps, and slave labor camps in April and May of 1945. The information was published extensively, continuously, and often comprehensively in the American Protestant religious press. The major events were reported. The boycott pogrom of April 1st, 1933 was reported in its entirety. April 1, 1933. The Aryan paragraph of April 7th, when the Jews first lost their jobs under the Stalinite, the ill-fated Evian Conference, the mass deportation of Jews, the whole story of the killing operation, from euthanasia to medical experiments, from mass killing by starvation, disease, and massacre, committed by the Einsatzgruppen to the death camps, which raises the second question. Why were Christians silent? An article that I published in 1945 stated it very bluntly. Too long have we Christians been silent. And this statement was published by the Federal Council of Churches in their official bulletin. That's the organization to which most of the Protestant denominations belong. It it would be a standing reproach against Christendom if the true Christians of the world were callously indifferent when Jews have been made victims of unchristian policies perpetrated by nominal Christians. While having lunch in the faculty club at the university one day, I was approached by one of the history faculty members, Hyman Berman, who was a good friend. And he said, "Would you like to meet Admiral Rickover?" I kind of thought he was kidding at first. But he said, "No, he's here at the table. I want to introduce you to him." He was on our campus for some kind of an official visit. And I was introduced to Admiral Rickover. And as you know, he's about 6 feet tall, he weighed about 120 pounds, and he had the most piercing blue eyes, I guess, ever invented. At least the sailors who served under him say that. And one of my students at the GTU was a naval officer under him, and he's confirmed that to me. We talked a little while, and he said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "I just finished a book on the Holocaust." What then do we do as we remember today events 44 and more years ago? Let me make several suggestions. I'm fully aware, because I have interviewed many myself and my students have interviewed many, that many survivors have not yet told their stories. I beg of you, in God's name, even in the quiet of your own bedroom with the table open, with no one there, tell us your story. We need your witness. Archives of survivor stories are being gathered in every state and area in the country. 21 tapes made by my students are part of an archive that is being built by the Jewish Community Religious Center, Relations Center in Minneapolis. And some of those materials have been sent to Austria for the Austrian archives because they were interviewed, instructed students about how to help people do this with an open tape recorder and in the quiet of their own rooms to open their hearts and tell their stories. We've recorded some people. One lady said, "I don't have any story to tell. Why do you want to have my story? I wasn't in a slave labor camp. I never worked, and it was never concentrated." No. She lived in a cave underground, covered by a wooden platform hidden by her family on the Polish-Russian border for almost 2.5 years. Every other week, they came and opened it during the summer, and they, about 4 in the morning, and they got fresh water, bathed in the creek, and the farmer and his wife took their clothes and brought them fresh clothes and washed them for them, and during the winter, they did that once a month. And they could hear the Nazi soldiers nearby, but they disguised that wooden platform with shrubbery, and they literally lived in a hole in the ground for 2.5 years, but she didn't have a story to tell in her own thinking, because she had never been concentrated. Her children had never heard that story. A young man interviewed his father and found out that he had been in 11 camps engaged in labor, that he had engaged in active sabotage of war material that he was responsible for making. And that boy had never heard his father's story until he interviewed him with a tape recorder. And when they were through, his mother came and said, "Why don't you interview me?" For she was a German girl who his father met in a DP camp after the war, married her, she became a convert to Judaism, and she had served when age 14 as a babysitter for a Nazi officer family, one of whose children was a Mongoloid and who was taken by the Nazis in the early euthanasia. And she saw that child, removed to be killed in the euthanasia at the age of 14. Her son never had heard that story. I could lecture about that one for the rest of the time. I'm going to quit. Really, I am. If you have any family records that you've been holding on to because they're so precious, children. Write these things upon their hands, upon their foreheads, upon their eyes, upon their minds, and upon their hearts. Challenge the revisionists forthrightly, directly, and courageously. Do not let them win an inch in the denial of the Holocaust. Two things have come to my attention just this week. The meaning of the Holocaust for bioethics. The medical community is now looking at the Holocaust as a metaphor for medical research, because current medical research in two ways is
based on a check